been an extraordinary trip to England, and I've just had the blast of my life. I'm here today at the National Railway Museum in York, England, which is one of the premier railroad museums in the entire world. It's just absolutely beautiful. What's interesting to me about a lot of the European locomotives and trains is that they take great pride in making sure that locomotives remain very clean, that they're maintained very well, that they are watched over and cared for. And I really believe that the more we pay attention to the small details of a locomotive, which include cleanliness, the better off that locomotive is and the better it is maintained. A few of the great examples in the United States that I like to think of quite often are places like the Strasburg. The 90 is immaculate all of the time. Grand Canyon Railway, the 4960 is always beautiful, looks very good. These locomotives that look good are also very well maintained. So if you've ever wondered, if you're working for a tourist type railroad or an operation that's running a locomotive, if you've ever wondered if there's any correlation between cleanliness and maintenance, I would propose to you that there actually is. That the cleaner the locomotive, the better inspected it is and the better maintained it is. It's not to say that a dirty locomotive isn't inspected well or doesn't run well. I look at the locomotives at the Durango and Silverton, for example, which get run very hard on a daily basis. The Cumbres and Toltec is another one. Those locomotives are inspected, they are maintained, but because of the extreme service that they run in, they're not necessarily the cleanest, and that's okay. But I do believe that on smaller operations and smaller situations, the better a locomotive is cleaned and maintained, the better it runs and the better it performs overall. So I'm going to take a few minutes and show you a few of my favorite scenes here at the National Railway Museum. And then from here we're headed back to Atlanta, Georgia for one more show with the miniature locomotives, the 15-inch gauge stuff. And so we've had a great time. I got to tell you just one other thing before I let you go and show you a little bit more about the museum. We've been here at Watt Train, which is a world organization for tourist railroads. It's similar to Train or ARM, but I really believe, as I spoke here yesterday, that the world is getting smaller and smaller in terms of communication and the way that we communicate. And these videos and producing videos are going out all over the world to all kinds of railfan and railfan groups. And it really is a testament to the fact that the world is getting smaller and our ability to communicate is getting better and better. So we hope that you will send us an email, watch for us on Facebook, send us some notes, ask us some questions, and get involved in these great groups. Watt Train, Heritage Railways in the UK, Train and ARM in the United States, and there are many, many great organizations all over the world. So thanks for watching this segment. Here's a couple of great scenes from the National Railway Museum, and we'll see you in Atlanta, Georgia here in our next segment. An interesting piece of history with locomotives is that generally speaking in the industry we think of locomotives as being black, because when we look back in history and look back in time, we see a lot of black and white photos. And black and white photos don't show very well, that is, differences in hue or color or even different shades of gray. Now if you look at certain black and white photos of the steam days, you'll notice that some boiler jackets were a different color than some tenders. And if you pay very close attention to black and white photos, you can actually start to see that indeed some locomotives were different colors, because the shades of gray that are in the different black and white colors are different colors, which would indicate that that locomotive may not necessarily be black, but it's another color. One of the things that I absolutely love about British and European locomotives is their use of color. Most of the British locomotives and the British railway locomotives were actually a very deep green. This particular locomotive from the LNER, the Millard, is actually a beautiful, beautiful blue. And they've got locomotives that are all colors, bright green, blue, reds. It's another interesting piece of history that Thomas the Tank Engine, the whole history and story behind Thomas the Tank Engine, was that it was based on British locomotives, all of which that had names, very specific names, and plaques and titles, and all of which that were also very specifically painted and detailed and colored. So it's neat to walk around the National Railway Museum and see all of the different colors of locomotives and the unique styles that they had and the unique personalities that they had. You can really imagine each of these locomotives having their own unique personality, because not only can you see it, but as you watch these locomotives operate, you can also feel it. So it's really neat to get to walk down here and see these different colors, see the personalities, and you can just imagine all of these locomotives, particularly this one, running at mainline speed through the beautiful valleys of England at speeds of 60, 70, 80, maybe even more miles per hour on a daily basis. It would have been just absolutely tremendous to see. One of my all-time favorite locomotives growing up and actually operating in life was one of the locomotives at Lagoon, the amusement park where I worked when I was a little bit younger. What was unique about one of the particular locomotives, which was a Crown locomotive, is it was fashioned in a very European style. It had wheel wells, it had a very sleek boiler jacket, some very defined brass features on it, some beautiful round porthole windows in the front. It was just a really unique locomotive, and again, it had its own personality, its own style. It operated differently than the other locomotives, and it's neat to stand here again with a beautifully colored and beautifully decorated locomotive that's much larger than the one that I grew up with, but is similar in fashion and style and shape. And it just accentuates again the comment and the idea that these locomotives really did have and do have their own unique personalities, more so here than in the United States. Most of our locomotives are all black. They're generally, the cabs are arranged the same, they're generally decorated the same. But here in Europe and here in England, you really see the uniqueness of every individual locomotive and how they really tried hard to make each one unique and give it its own little personality. This is a beautiful locomotive. Behind it is a beautifully restored coach, a Pullman coach, done in all hardwoods and in very brown colors. Just absolutely beautiful equipment. Right here to my left is the beautiful 926, which belongs to Mr. Steve Tidwell in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, when we filmed our opening sequence for this next video, my microphone actually failed, which it doesn't do very often, but it did for that sequence. So I'm here in Cheyenne with the 926, but we're going to rewind the clock right now, and I'm going to take you back to Atlanta, Georgia, and we're going to tour Steve Tidwell's beautiful railroad, and we're also going to go around the track and talk with Mr. Tidwell for a few minutes. We're very grateful that he allowed us the opportunity to film on his location. He's got a beautiful little 15-inch gauge railroad, and he's opened up the railroad to anybody that wants to come see it or even operate on it. So we'll hope that you enjoy the few minutes that we spend with Steve Tidwell, and then we're going to come back after a few minutes and we'll wrap up the whole video. So here we go with Steve Tidwell, the 926 in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here with Mr. Steve Tidwell, owner and purveyor of the Little Southern Railway here in Lithonia, Georgia. And Steve and I have become great friends, and it's been a great honor to know him and to be a friend and to be out here with the Little Southern Railway. But Steve, what's interesting about your locomotive is when you saw it the first time, you instantaneously had a different vision for the locomotive. Now, for those of you that know a little bit about the history of these locomotives, this locomotive, the 926, which is now the 926, used to be known as the 1310, which was in Menlo Park, California, and it was painted a beautiful purple and gray, and it had a little bit of baby blue and paint scheme. And when Steve saw the locomotive, he instantaneously saw something else. Steve, tell us what it was that you saw in that southern style of yours.
Well, the old Southern Railway, going back to when Fairfax Harrison was the president, visited England, and he saw that the Southern Railway in England painted their engines green. And if I'm correct on this, their first order of heavy 462s, he ordered them to be painted green. And then it got to be something that was done throughout the system of Southern Railway, was to paint all of the passenger equipment green, from the 440s that ran around Montgomery and Selma up to the big 482s that would pull the trains around the big Saluda grade in Asheville and actually work through Birmingham and Atlanta also. The first time I ever saw a Southern green steam engine and can remember it was back in 1967 when the 4501, which was painted green, though it's a freight engine, the 282, was painted and styled like a Southern PS4. And I tell you, you see that green color, and it differentiates those engines from the regular old black drab steam engines that you see, which is nothing in the world wrong with that. But it's a certain amount of personality and a certain amount of class, individuality that's added to it. I also grew up on the Birmingham division of the Southern Railway, which is on the west side of Atlanta. So that had a big influence on me, and it was just very, very handsome. It had great lines. It was proportioned correctly, and it was a beautiful color. And if I have my information correctly, Southern operated 440s up until 1939.
Wow.
And of course they were holdovers from short lines that Southern bought in this region. They didn't order any or anything like that. But I thought, well, it'd be great to have a Southern 440 and painted in the Southern green, and that's the basic inspiration for it.
Wow, it's really neat. And there's a lot of really neat Southern attributes that you've given this locomotive. We put the headlight down on the smoke box.
Headlight centered. There's an eagle on the sand dome. Sometimes the eagles might have been on the headlight. The bell is in front of the stack. It to me has what I like to call, for lack of better words, very clean lines, and it's very symmetrical. You might even say it has a little bit of a USRA look.
Yeah.
But it was that first sight of 4501 in 1967 in the green, and it's just like seeing history come alive. So I just said, if I ever have one, it's got to be like that. And the interesting thing about 4501, it was purchased from the Kentucky and Tennessee Railroad as number 12 from an individual named Paul Merriman. And once it was overhauled and allowed, and Southern leased it, he made the statement that it would be painted in Southern green, just like the old Southern PS4s and their 462s and so on and so forth. And the reason for that was the majesty of the Southern green. Sometimes it's called apple green, Southern green, and I'm sure every batch wasn't exactly the same as the other one, but you get the impression that they're different.
Yeah.
And they were stately. And from what I've read in books about the Southern shops, the crews did the shop crews did a wonderful job, as the road crews did, of maintaining the engines and just keeping them distinctive and pristine in their appearance and operation.
Yeah. In my earlier segment, we talked about the Millard over at the National Railway Museum. And I made a comment in that video that when locomotives are clean and painted well, they're generally maintained even better. Now we got to move on real quick to one other thing. Steve's dream in life, a picture of Steve in his backyard when he was a little tyke, about this high, on a little train that he'd made out of barrels and boxes and crates and different things like that. Steve's dreams growing up was to be a road foreman. And yesterday when we had the family reunion event here at the railroad, Steve handed out titles, and he made me the superintendent.
Correct.
And Steve was the road foreman.
Correct.
And yesterday at the end of the day, you talked to some of your family relatives and was proud of the fact that you had been the road foreman. So just, Steve, tell us quickly the little history about why road foreman over any other title.
Well, the road foreman, as I understand it, would have been the individual that would have been in charge of the engineers. So back in, let's say, the olden days, for lack of better words, I would have started out as a fireman, worked my way up to engineer, been on the extra board, and eventually got my regular run. And hopefully management would have seen that I had enough interest in the company and that my loyalty would have been to the company to make sure the locomotives and the engineers function to maximum perfection. And that would have been a dream of mine, to have several engineers and locomotives under my charge, to be sure that they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, when they were supposed to do it, as quickly and as economically and as safely as possible.
You know, that's great, because yesterday you had 2 locomotives out here. You were in charge of both of them. We had a perfect day yesterday.
Oh, it was great. It was great. It was. I think yesterday was undoubtedly, of course, your engine and you being here added so much to it, but was probably, unquestionably, let me rephrase that, unquestionably the best day we've had here.
Wow. Well, that's great. That's great. Now, as you all can see watching the video, Mr. Tidwell is the epitome of a true Southern gentleman. So we're going to invite you again. If you want to come out and see the railroad, get in touch with us at Wasatch Railroad. We'll make sure that we get in touch with Mr. Tidwell for you, and he'll love to have you come down. Steve, thanks again for all that you've done. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to do it.
We appreciate it, and we'll have a good time running today.
We'll do it, and y'all come.
Okay, I'm going to take you on a short tour of the little Southern Railway. Just briefly, the railroad is 1,200 feet in a great big circle, and the circle has a higher elevation point on it, and it's got a lower elevation point on it. We're starting right at the Y, and we're going to go around the top side of the loop, which is near the house, follow down around the bottom, and then through what's called the airline division, which is a long straightaway piece of track, and then back up to the Y area. The entire ride takes about 4 minutes. We're not going to do the entire 4-minute segment, but here's a couple of little scenes on a full tour of the entire railroad. Here we go. Backside near the house is a little bit of an upgrade as we go through this S-curve here. And once we get to the top of the S-curve, we're going to dive down pretty hard as we go into the airline division. When Steve bought the facility, it was completely covered over with trees and bushes. You couldn't even walk back here at all. Since then, he's had the whole area cleared out. Ryan Habercorn and I, and a few others from Wasatch, walked through the whole area, laid out the original roadbed. And where we're going now is not necessarily the original roadbed, but it's pretty close to it. a little bit coming down grade just to keep the train in check. Once we go around this right-hand curve, then we're on the airline division where we can kind of open it up a little bit. Nice long piece of straightaway track in front of it. And then we go out the final loop back up to the Y area where the water tower is. The railroad has a complete Y on it, so you can run either clockwise, which is what we've just done, or you can run counterclockwise as well. Coming into the Y, we're back into a little bit of an upgrade hill until we get to the other leg of the Y where things even out a little bit. Steve's got the 926 out and they're ready to go, so we're going to stop just short of them. We'll let them go ahead of them. So we've just wrapped up a great tour starting at the ATT and NW. Then we were over in England at the Romney Height and Dim Church. Then to York, England, back to America to Steve Tidwell's great place. And here we are back in Cheyenne at the beginning of 2013 with some great and exciting events coming up this year, starting with the world's greatest hobby on tour in San Francisco the first full weekend of March. And then you'll want to put this one on your calendar. In May, we're going to be holding an open house in conjunction with the Sherman Hill Model Railroad Club's annual model train show, which is the 17th, 18th, and 19th of May. We're going to have a huge open house here at the shop on Friday. Then the shop's going to be open on Saturday and Sunday. You'll be able to come in, see all of the neat locomotives. We're going to have them running in and out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, before we leave you today, we're going to do another Facebook contest because the Facebook contests have been a lot of fun. But this time we're going to pick 3 people randomly. And here's how you win this contest. We want to know what groups you hang out with on the internet. Like there's the Union Pacific group, or there's the Grand Scales group, or there's the Park Trains group. And there's a lot of web pages and forums out there where a lot of you hang out. And many of you see us at these different forums, like at Railway Preservation News and other places. But we want to know where you're hanging out. So send us a note directly to our Facebook page and tell us where you're hanging out, or tell us what your special group is. We'll come sign on to your group and introduce ourselves to our group. And again, randomly, we're going to pick 3 of you, and we're going to send you either a hat, a shirt, or a pair of gloves. So make sure we have enough information on you to be able to get that prize back to you. Thanks again for watching our videos. We sure have a great time doing them. We're going to have some great videos coming up in 2013. We're going to answer a lot of questions, and we're going to go out to some big railroads and see a lot of neat stuff. So keep watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you with our next episode.